Sir, congratulations for your commission. There's no finer officer than a Mustang officer. They're smarter, more capable, and have better instincts. Yep, I saluted Sergeant Norman when he said that, and I quite agreed with him, actually. I was a sergeant at 19. I was a Green Beret, and now I knew everything because I was a second lieutenant. So as I was saying, as a 22-year-old second lieutenant, I thought I had it all figured out. And of course, I was making mistakes left and right. Because I had been prior enlisted, I really thought I had the right point of view. And I had a great mentor that came along and said, let me tell you a story about when I was a lieutenant. And instead of telling me all the faults of my ways, he told me the story. He said, at one point in my career, I was tasked to build a bridge over a stream to help tanks get across. And so, as a prior enlisted soldier, I got down in the mud with my men. And I took off my blouse, and I was down there sweating and digging in the mud and showing them that I was strong, I was capable. I was not above it all. I was very proud of myself. All of a sudden, the colonel came, a battalion commander, and went like this. And he asked him to follow him up the hill. And he goes up the hill, and the colonel sits under a shade tree, lights a cigar, and starts smoking. Now, he doesn't say anything to the lieutenant. Lieutenant's thinking, what the heck is going on here? 10 minutes go by. 20 minutes go by. The colonel still says nothing to the lieutenant. All of a sudden, he's thinking, you know, my men are probably really thinking I'm a terrible officer. I'm up here, I'm sure they can smell the cigar smoke and think I'm just slacking. 30 minutes go by. Colonel says nothing. 45 minutes go by, and all of a sudden the lieutenant goes, you know, we should have. And the colonel said, exactly. Stood up, walked away. What do you think happened? He put the bridge in the wrong spot. Now, do you think his men appreciated the fact that he was down there in the mud digging away at that? Or do you think they would have appreciated the fact that he had the perspective of a leader, a different point of view, and actually put the bridge in the right spot? Of course, that's what they would have preferred. And what he had to do is go down the hill and basically tell his men, we screwed up. I screwed up. And it was because of pride and ego. Now, the whole idea here is you are not paid to be busy. A second lieutenant's not paid to be busy. A squadron commander isn't paid to be busy. I can't even find in the business world anywhere in any job description that it says part of the job is to be busy or to look busy. But yet we are. We're frenetic. And you might recognize this word, some of you that took Latin, primum non nocere. First, no harm. Physicians take that oath, right? Do no harm. But as leaders, we don't have a similar oath, but we should. Because that busyness really results in this. 25% of the time, our employees, our soldiers, our airmen feel that they're ignored, and that results in 40% disengagement. They're checked out. They might not look it because they might look busy, but they're checked out. A third of the time, when we give feedback, we actually produce a decline in performance. Whenever we give feedback, we actually initiate the flight or fight response anyway. And a third of the time, we're so busy, we're rushing through it, we actually decrease performance. I've got a ton of executives that I work with that think 15 minutes a week is okay as far as coaching time with their people. Think about a professional sports team, basketball team, 5 people. Do you think they get coached once a month, twice a year, once a year? They get coached every day in practice and even in the game. They're coached all the time. Yet we think there's shortcuts to it, there's hacks to it, and there aren't. And all this busyness results in us not really being trusted by our teams. And if we've heard from all the lectures so far today, if we don't have trust, we have nothing when it comes to our team. So what's the solution to all this? Okay, those of you taking notes, it's one word. Stop. Just stop. Slow down and take a break. It's this whole idea of solitude, about stepping back from it all and having time to reflect, to figure out what's important, What's the root cause? What's the cause and effect? What are the patterns? What are the connections I need to make to be more effective? You've heard a bunch of people quote Socrates today about know thyself. Super important. Well, this whole idea isn't new. In fact, the Chinese have a proverb that goes something like this. There was a king that was going to turn the kingdom over to his son. And he said, first you have to go to he said, first you have to go see the master. So the prince goes to the master and he says, okay, here I am. What do I need to do to become king? And the master says, well, it's simple. You need to go out in the woods for a year and then come back and tell me what you heard. Pretty simple exercise. So the prince goes off for a year. He comes back. He gets in front of the master and he says, Master, I heard the birds sing. I heard the hummingbirds hum. And at night, I heard crickets chirp and the wind whisper and holler. And the master went, no go. You got to go back to the field. Get back out in the woods and come back when you hear the unheard. So the prince, of course, frustrated, goes back to the woods. I don't know how long, but he comes back to the master and he says, Master, when I listened most closely, I could hear the unheard. I could hear the sun warming the earth. I could hear the grass drinking the morning dew. I could hear flowers opening. And the master said, exactly. When you hear the unheard, you can hear feelings uncommunicated and pains unexpressed and complaints not spoken. And only then do you have the discipline necessary to be an effective leader. Well, you think about that. I mean, he's asking him to hear the unheard, to hear people's values, their assumptions, their beliefs, their expectations. That takes time. That takes some time to do that. And what I believe is when we have that time, we're able to solve some of the greatest problems we're going to confront as leaders. And I call them communication problems. We see that every day in the news. And it's design problems. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's take an example. Anybody know what this is a picture of? Any guesses? Anybody been to survival training? This is a shelter in the Wallowa Mountains of Oregon. I lead expeditions with executives and veterans. And on this particular one, we had 2 teams of 8. Each team had 4 executives and 4 veterans. When I went to this team and said, your job is to make a shelter that would last 3 days, and you have 1 hour to do it. I went and I saw these 8 people. I said, what are you doing? And one fellow said, well, I'm carrying this log over to here. They told me to get a big log, and we're building some sort of shelter. Well, I don't know if you can see it in this picture, but it was pretty much a mess. I mean, I don't think it would have lasted 3 days. It wouldn't have lasted 3 hours. There's logs just thrown. They serve no functional purpose. Now, when I went to the other team that actually happened to have an F-16 driver as part of the team, codenamed Waldo, what I found halfway through the project was this. It's pretty recognizable A-frame, pretty sturdy. But here's what was most interesting is at the beginning of the exercise, for 15 minutes of the hour, this is what they did. They talked about what they were going to build. In the first shelter, when I went there, there was one person running around telling everybody what to do. Busy, 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 busy. Micromanaging, if you will. When I went to this group, there wasn't one person directing everything. There was a whole bunch of people working because they knew what they were going to build. They knew what it looked like. Somebody explained the vision. Hey, we're going to have an A-frame, and here's the components, and here's the lashings. They knew what they were building. And if we're leading, we are building something. And part of our job is to be able to effectively communicate what it is that we intend to happen. And I call this really the future bucket. That's where the second team spent most of their time. They were talking about expectations and commander's intent and what they really wanted to see happen. And they were ensuring that the communication sent was actually the communication received. The other group was really focused on this whole thing about accountability. We hear that all the time. There needs to be accountability. Consequences. Catch people doing things right, catch them doing wrong. We've got to enforce the standards. Of course you have to do that. But where even when you're in the accountability bucket, at some point you're going to be back and saying, here's what we need to have happen in the future. And you all are really good at this thing called the after-action review, the hot wash, the debrief, whatever you call it. And you know the 4 components better than I do. What happened, what was supposed to happen, what happened, do we do well and why, and what needs to be improved and how. Now, my question is, what needs to be improved and how? What do you mostly come up with? No matter what is wrong in the military, what is the thing you always throw at problems? Any guesses? Training, right? Same in the civilian sector. If we're having problems, maybe the people don't know how to do it. It's a can't do. We just need to train them more. Safety, this, that, whatever it is, we're going to train them. And what I'm saying is that if we look at that, every problem is a nail, then every solution is a hammer. And if that's training, I think you're missing the mark. I think it goes back to being a design problem. You recognize this picture, it's an intersection. If you kept having accidents in this intersection, would you say, geez, we need to keep training the drivers over and over again, or here's a picture you're probably more familiar with, is change the taxiways. We need to train the pilots more and more and more, when it might actually be a design problem. It might have something to do with roles and responsibilities or incentives, how people are rewarded, and I'm not talking monetary. What the processes are or the SOPs might need to be changed. But it takes a leader that can actually be up on the hill and see a different perspective of that cause and effect. Because as a leader, you're the only one that has that perspective. You're the only one that has all the bits of information that has the ability to pull all that together. And of course, you need to have a strong team supporting you. Now, at the end of the day, this whole idea of solitude is that you're the one that has to make that decision. You are accountable. You are responsible. And you're thinking, well, okay, that's great. There's a lot of demands on my time. But here's what I really believe is that you've got to slow down to speed up. And one of the best tools is something I learned from a retired Air Force colonel back when I was a lieutenant. He came in, did an officer professional development in a room just like this. And he told about how he crossed the border into Laos and Cambodia, violating a whole bunch of rules, and didn't get his star because of it. But it was a revenge mission. And he said, so I was set to become a brigadier general. I never made it. He goes, what got me through? That bad experience, violating, letting my anger take over. He said, I remembered that all great leaders have kept journals. And that's what I did. I really focused on the things that I could control, which is where I spent my time and how I responded to the environment. Those are things that I can focus on all the time. And I can tell you that there is no there when it comes to this whole idea of leadership. I think one of the things that you would probably see in common with everybody that comes up on the stage and talks about leadership is the fact that the more that they know about leadership, the more that they realized there are many flaws. And how boy, I can't believe even 6 months ago how I thought I had it all figured out, much less when I was my 22-year-old self. So if this resonates with you and you'd like some ideas on this, just drop me a note and I'll be glad to send you some of the material that I've written on solitude and journaling. And by journaling, I'm not thinking about writing a diary and writing about feelings. I'm thinking about really looking at things that you can do to improve, looking for ways to be grateful. And this is the greatest tool you're ever going to have, in my opinion, for your professional development. Most of you will spend a third to half your time in the military in schools. But I think the ability to process what you've learned, to read, to have great mentors, seek them out, to journal and reflect, and to take time when you need to is really important. At the end of the day, of course, it's not about you. It's about the team. And I remember when my son finished up his platoon leader time as a 23-year-old, I sarcastically said, well, now son that you've got this whole leadership thing figured out, what have you learned? And he said, well, Dad, I know it's not about me, and I know that what I really have to do to be able to effectively lead my soldiers is I've got to listen. I have to care about them. Because if I don't understand where they're coming from, I can't even imagine effectively leading. And I thought, you know what? Even though he's a thoroughbred, because he went to West Point, I thought maybe, just maybe, he's developed some Mustang instincts. So with that, I thank you for the honor of being here today. I hope to see many of you in the lab at 1400, where we're going to talk about those crucible expeditions I mentioned. Thank you.